the meeting of the Maple Grove Unified District to order for January 18th. The time is 6 p.m. The group is assembled at Northwest Center and Technical Northwest Career and Technical Center. I'd like to I call this meeting to order. I would like to ask everyone to stand up and join me for a quick moment of silence to reflect upon the life of Al Corey. We lost Al Corey yesterday. He's been a radio guy, a tech center guy, a teacher. He's been on the negotiation table. He's been on the mentor table. He's been anywhere he was needed. He was able to be there. He's a lifelong school board member, and he will be sorely missed here at Northwest Supervisory, wherever I have Maple Run Supervisory Union. So a moment of silence, please. All right, thank you for that. And now please join me for a pledge of allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Somebody call my name?
No, Nelda, I didn't know if you knew your camera was off, but you got it adjusted.
Oh, yeah. Okay, the next item on the agenda. I didn't do the agenda review. A quick glance of the agenda. I don't believe there's anything that we need to modify unless anyone has anything they want to point out to me. So we'll just move on to the visitor section. Do we have any visitors in the room?
No visitors.
Okay. Do we have any visitors in queue on the remote?
So I've posted the prompt, but nobody's responded just yet.
Thanks, John.
Well, no visitors. Okay. Time is it? 6:02. I guess we're not gonna have any visitors. I just wanted to update you real quick. In the visitors section, I think I told some of you when I called you up, I was going to add people could speak for 3 minutes on one topic, but when the timer went off, they stopped dead in their tracks. Okay. How do you guys feel about that? That this is sort of informally, I'm asking you. You know, we've got feedback a couple of weeks ago that there wasn't enough time for them to speak. So if we went for 3 minutes, but then just cut them off, would that be better, worse, the same?
We can try it. Yeah.
Nils, I might just suggest that somebody, whoever's keeping time, raise their hand or something rather than have them cut mid-sentence. So raise their hand at 2.5 minutes, just so they'll know that they're running out of time.
Okay, that's a good idea. All right, we'll do that next month just to see how it flies. If it doesn't work for us.
If someone comes with prepared remarks written down, that they be allowed to deliver them.
Yeah, you know, I hear you, but it gets really touchy then, because then you're favoring as you know, Peter would tell you, you're favoring the person that can speak in front of a bunch of people over the person that may not. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be accused of any of these things. I want to be as.
But I mean, I just mean in terms of length. If you have,
I know,
I
understand.
2 pages written and you get to 1.5 pages,
yeah,
you should be allowed to finish that half page.
I mean, I guess, you know, there's a little bit of judgment involved in this, right? I'm gonna just let it ride and see how it plays. Well, you know, we'll evaluate next time. Okay, this isn't on the agenda, so I just want to take a second.
Oh, I was
Go
going
ahead.
to say, I think if someone has prepared marks, they can be entered into the record. Can they do that, or can they? Yeah.
They can actually, yes.
It's open meeting law that anything prepared can be submitted in writing and put into the record.
Right. And actually, I could add that to this little section. If you have a prepared statement and you don't have the opportunity to get through it, please submit it to the
There.
MRUSD and we can make it work. Okay, so the next item is the consent agenda. And we have 2 items on that. We have minutes from January 4th and January 11th and 12th. And we have the media packages. Anyone need to pull any of those out for discussion? Hearing none, we're going to move on to reports to the board, and that's Nina's section.
Thanks, Nilda. 6A, Student Board Representatives Report. I'm going to say Leah and Maura, sorry. Maura.
Sure. So this past week, we had the 8th graders come up and tour the Northwest Tech Center. So we had MVU and then all of the Maple Run sending schools. We've had guidance scheduling. So our schedules they should be out during sometime in the 2nd semester. New semester classes are also starting next week. PLPs are due this week. It's the last semester ever for seniors. Graduation is approaching. Prom planning is well underway. And we're just getting ready for a busy spring at VFA, so it's kind of the calm before the storm right now. But yeah, that's about it.
That's it? Okay. Anybody have any questions or anything to add?
You're both juniors, right?
Yes, one more year.
Okay. SEL data for fall 22, attachment 6B. Alexis?
All right, John, I think is gonna put up a quick presentation with the information. Oh. So similar to last year, we did a climate SE social emotional learning survey to our students this year. Again, I will say right at the beginning, we are going to do another survey again in the spring. So we like to do it at least twice a year so we can compare the results from where we started the year and how we ended the year in terms of belonging and safety and climate. This one, last year we did a student and staff survey. We just did a student survey this year. So these results only reflect the student responses and it's grades 3 through 12. So just some quick background information. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that we had a very impressive response rate. So when you look at the response rate across all of our schools within Maple Run, that includes the tech center, it was a 73% response rate, which equates to 1,455 staff out of our total 1,990 students in grades 3 through 12. Thank you for that. If you go on to
Can I just ask one, was that given to them at school, like to be able to do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so that's a really great question. I was going to get to that later, but I'll just tackle it now. So it was administered at school. There was time set aside for the students to take it, and the staff did a lot of prep work in terms of giving students appropriate accommodations as needed. So, for example, if students needed the questions read to them instead of just taking it independently on the computer screen, they were with an adult and the adult was reading it to them. If some of the terms or the language used in the questions needed to be broken down and explained in a different way, because you might have to explain it to third graders differently than you explain it to sophomores. The classroom teachers did that support as well. So there was a lot of pre-work before the survey went out.
Thank you.
If you go to the next slide, so the results that you are going to see are the results of our favorable response rates within each category and within the questions that were asked. So before we get into the actual results, I thought it would be helpful to define what do we mean when we say a favorable response rate. So how that's defined by Panorama is that it's the percentage that you're going to see either represents the percentage of the respondents that selected a favorable answer choice, or 81% of the responses across all questions within that domain received a favorable response rate. And we'll kind of get into the examples of both when I break down the actual questions. So one example is if the question was, how well do people at school understand you as a person? There were a total of 5 multiple choice options for the students to choose from, and the ones highlighted in green are what are coded as a favorable response rate. The ones that are in black are an unfavorable response. So that's how Panorama differentiates and codes. It's also important to point out that all of the questions, we did not write the questions ourselves. So we use the Panorama Student Success Platform at Maple Run, which is just an evidence-based data software platform for social emotional learning, and they have brochures and manuals around questions that actually aligns to the CASEL SEL competencies and break it down in domains around school climate, safety, diversity, well-being, belonging, et cetera, et cetera. So we did not come up with these questions or the multiple choice answer options. That was done for us through Panorama. And again, that's because it's all backed by their research and their evidence-based practices that they use. Yeah. So if you, for this survey, our questions fell into one of 3 categories, which is a little bit different than last year, intentionally. So this year we focused on school safety, well-being, and a sense of belonging. Those were just the 3 primary topics that we agreed to target as a leadership team. Part of that is because we also have found that if we add too many questions to a survey, the quality of the responses declines because students are less likely to either complete the survey or they're more likely to possibly rush through the survey if there are just too many questions or if the questions are too repetitive and too redundant. So we agreed to focus on these 3 areas for this year. And that's, again, across the domains, the percentage reflects the percentage of favorable responses. If you move on to the next, so I also broke down, you can see the exact questions that were asked per category and per domain. So in the school safety category, there was only 1 question asked, which means if you go back to that definition of what is a favorable response rate, what this tells you is that 88% of the responses were favorable to that question. And this one is, again, there was 5 multiple choice options in terms of I feel completely safe, I feel somewhat safe, I feel quite a bit safe, I don't feel safe at all. The next category was well-being. You can see there was a lot more questions within that category. So the dots on bullets 2 and 3 and then 5 and 6, what that means is the first question was just repeated with different persons reflected in the question. So for example, do you have a teacher or other adult from school who you can count on to help you no matter what? The second question was, do you have a family member or other adult outside of school who you can count on to help you no matter what, and so on and so forth. So that was an 87% favorable response rate across all of the questions and all of the responses. And then if you go to the final category, these were the questions that were asked under the domain of a sense of belonging. And again, the 81% favorable response rate says that on average, all the questions together received an average favorable response rate of 81% across the whole district, grades 3 through 12. If you go to the next slide, so we also did a disaggregation of data. So what this means, there's a lot of numbers up there, so I acknowledge that. So if you look in all 3 of the areas, school safety, well-being, and sense of belonging, what Panorama allows you to do is you can dig in deeper to the data to see if there's any discrepancies across multiple categories. So we disaggregated the data based on students that were on a 504 plan, students that were accessing special education supports through an individualized education plan, so an IEP, An EST stands for an Educational Support Plan, which means there's tier 2 interventions and supports being provided to students, free and reduced lunch, English language learners, and then BIPOC versus those students that solely identify as white. So what's important to point out here is that there are categories for students that identify as biracial. So for example, if we have a student that identifies as Black and white, they're reflected in the BIPOC numbers. They're only reflected in those that students that solely identify as white are reflected in that category of students. So what this means is that you can see if there was and what the difference in the response rate is within each of those categories across the 3 domains that we surveyed. So for example, if you look at 504 under school safety, what that means is that 81% of students on a 504 plan answered favorably to school safety questions versus 88% of students that are not on a 504 plan answered favorably to school safety questions. So that is where you can kind of break down and see if there are any statistically significant differences in each of those subcategories. And obviously, if you look down here, so if you see 87 and 87, for example, there's no difference in the response rate. If you go to the last slide, I think.
So are all differences statistically significant?
No.
Okay.
Yes, they're not. Yeah.
Do you know which ones are?
Yeah.
So none of those are statistically significant differences.
So nothing, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So if you go to I think this is the last slide. So what we also did, like I said, we gave a similar survey with some of the actually exact same questions last year. Again, we did it twice last year in the fall and in the spring, and we did a comparison to see what our response rates were this year compared to last year. If you look at school safety, again, the favorable response rates, fall 2021 to fall 2022 was an increase of 16%. If you look at sense of belonging, it was an increase of 20%. And then you can't really compare well-being because last year we didn't target any questions within the well-being category. We did school climate questions instead. So that's not an equal comparison, but I wanted to kind of show the differences. So the favorable response rate to the school climate questions last year was 61%, and then the favorable response rate to the well-being questions this year is 87%, but obviously the not applicable is because it's not a fair comparison because they're 2 completely different categories with different questions. I think I see Nilda and then I see Joanna.
Nilda, go ahead.
Can you flip back to the previous slide? So when I look at the EST row, does that mean under school safety that the N is 91 plus 88?
No, so what that represents is that 91% of students on an EST plan answered favorably to school safety versus 88% of students not on an EST plan
Okay.
answered favorably.
Right, so in that same row, it's the only one that the ratios are flipped
Yeah, and what I
in all 3 categories, all 3 don't. I know you said this isn't statistically significant, but do you have any insight as to what prompted that flip?
So I didn't dive that deep into the data, but what I will say is if they're not on an EST, that doesn't mean that they're not on a 504 or an IEP. So they could be reflected in the 504 and IEP numbers. So it's not necessarily saying that the 88, for example, the 88% of students that are not on an EST that answered favorably to school safety, that's not necessarily general education students. That could include students in the IEP because they're not on an EST plan. if that makes sense.
Yep, thank you.
It's not one or the other, is what I'm trying to say.
Joanne, did you have
I think you answered it. You started to say in the beginning that you purposely did not choose the same information to survey, and then at the end, you did, right? You have school safety and sense of belonging, so that was repeated from last year.
Yep.
So the only thing that's different is the school climate.
Well, also we asked a bunch of diversity and inclusion questions last year that we did not answer this year. And the reason for that is because we're already in action plan steps around the responses to those questions. So that's where the creative discourse comes in, the listening sessions come in. We're taking all of that data and all of those responses and creating an action plan moving forward. So that's why we didn't do that section again, because we're already moving on those results.
I appreciate your efforts, and I truly am glad that we're rising and that it's positive. Just personally, the document appears to me to be flawed in the sense that if anyone could explain the difference between understanding somewhat, which gets a positive response, and understanding a little, which gets a negative response, and the fact that 3 out of 5 gets you positive marks, I'm just wondering if this could be tweaked and worded separately, because it just seems to me vague.
Yeah, I definitely hear that and I appreciate that, and I think that's the challenge. There's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons with software and data systems, right? So one of the cons to using Panorama as our platform is if we custom make questions, which we can, so we
Right.
could do that, but if we custom make the questions and the answers, we lose all of the research and the evidence backing for Panorama. So that's why we choose just to pull from what has already been researched and evaluated as effective. But I hear that that has actually come up before in our internal conversations. And we could definitely talk about that more in terms of tightening up or giving possibly fewer multiple choice options to make the distinction clear
Thank you.
to students. Yeah.
So what you're saying is this program, the Panorama program, is research-based for reliability and validity.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see Peter's concerns if they were homemade questions. But the fact that this is a program developed, I don't know how many thousands of students they've asked these questions to. But they must have, like when I did this kind of research way back when, I would pick something that was reliable and valid from a research company, rather than, you know, a lot of the staff members wanted to write their own questions and all that, but they didn't have the backing of thousands of trials that you know, a research company program would have.
So, let it go.
The other piece, just if I can quickly add to that, because this conversation is making me think a little bit deeper. When we custom make questions, we also lose some added features in terms of we can't compare it to national benchmarks. So if we stick with the Panorama, again, because they're researched and they're evidence-based, if we stick with those questions, we have access to more larger data pools of comparison, which we lose when we do it on our own.
So is there a way you can take out that middle question and have it be like, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree?
That means we're custom making it.
That's the custom.
Yeah.
Well, then you probably also lose traceability back to prior
Yes.
years, right? Because they
Okay.
keep the same.
Yeah, so if you ever mess with the answer options or the questions, you lose a lot of.
Yep.
Yeah. Susan and Joanna and then Susan. I don't know. Sorry. Not my role. I'm so sorry.
Do you have the information by school?
We do. Yes.
And
We-
is that something that can be shared as well?
I think that that's a conversation we can have. We chose just to do district overview results. As a leadership team, I think that's what we.
Yeah, that's what we
Agreed to
agreed
do.
as a leadership team, was to do district level results in a public presentation.
Susan?
So most of these five, these 5 scale answers, completely understand quite a bit, understand somewhat. I've seen on a maybe 0 to 5, but it's 3 is an agree, somewhat agree and strongly agree, and then disagrees or somewhat disagree, complete, something like that. So a 3 would be in the middle and it'd be favorable, not these words.
Yeah.
Could you do something like this? Is there a way to run the report where you're just looking at the percentage? Let's say we're gonna say understand quite a bit and completely understand. Those are, how many of those are favorable? I'm not explaining this right.
Yeah, you would
How
just
many 4s and 5s versus how many 3, 4s and 5s?
you would just have to code it differently, which we can do. So what we could do is we could say completely understand and understand quite a bit are our favorable response rates.
Yeah.
Whereas the third one, you either could do unfavorable or neutral. There is
Yeah.
a neutral option, and then the bottom 2 are unfavorable. So we could,
Could do that.
do
And then
that.
you could still compare them
Yeah.
year to year,
yes,
if you ran last year's as well.
Yeah.
Do we lose the national benchmark?
no, because you're not changing the wording of the answer option, you're changing how they're coded, which we can do. So what I'm hearing is maybe next time that middle option, we code as neutral
Well,
Yeah.
instead of favorable.
I need to kind of jump in here.
You go
I'm just
right ahead.
curious.
None of us at this table are psychometricians. That's what Panorama pays many of their, and that's someone who designs test questions and does it on a research base. And that's what we pay for the Panorama piece. And they know how to develop questions, so we're getting the answers for what our actual research question is. So I want to use their expertise to do that.
And either way, sorry, looking at this, it looks like, because we used all the same metrics and the same wording.
Right.
Yeah.
Either way, the favorability for, let's say, school safety has gone from 72 to 88.
Still
Sense of
enough.
belonging has gone from 61 to 81. Okay.
Grant and then Jack, sorry.
Just kind of following up on the.
Can't take it
on the
all.
benchmark and, sort of concept. Are there, sort of conclusions that you can draw, like schools that have an 81% sense of belonging, tend to do X, Y, Z, or are there, is there a target that you should be striving for, or like what's the take home? I mean, it's good that it's an increase, but at some point it becomes hopefully like asymptotic towards hopefully 100%, but
Right.
probably something lower than that. Like what's good? What does good look like?
I think that is a question that we would have to dive deeper in, because the answer may change based on the schools. Because again, this is the response rate for the whole district, but if you're asking what is kind of different this year than last year, or what changes have we made, or where are we going, I think the questions.
I think what I'm asking is if you go to, all the schools that are using this system, are there characteristics of those schools that correlate with the outcomes, that we're tracking here? Where, if we're at 80%, we can expect, this from our graduates, or if we're at 81%, we can expect, this in terms of, spending on behavior, or, whatever thing you might want to correlate it to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I'm only one person and it's only my perspective, but I think on a very general surface level, I think all the schools would agree that they've done a tremendous amount of work and investment around restorative practices, social emotional learning, trauma-informed consultation and PD, and really focusing on just making connections with students and building relationships. And that's really building that foundation around just connection and safety. But I think if you want to get in the weeds around what is measurable and what specifically does that look like and what is happening, I wouldn't want to speak for all of the individual buildings because it looks very, very different.
Jack?
Yeah, So what makes me curious about this is the school climate versus well-being. Like, I would wanna go back to the school climate thing and see how that is in subsequent years. Because that looked like a pretty low number in comparatively.
Yeah.
So looking at that, I would say, I wonder how school climate is next year, or, you know, this current year, or whatever.
Yeah, and that's when we do them twice a year, we always reopen the conversation with the leadership team on what do we want to target and what do we want to focus on right now. So I am pretty confident in saying we will be assessing school climate in the very near future.
I would think some of that would have to do with COVID too, coming back into it.
But it's not an all or nothing. It's not like we didn't ask it this time, so we're never going to ask it again and review the data.
So to kind of piggyback on Grant's question, did Panorama do any research, like a school that has an 81% of something tends to, on academics, do this? Or graduation rate do that? Like, was there any parallels that they made?
So they have what's called a playbook, so what comes with our survey response rates, and within each domain and each category, they give you a playbook both per school and per district on strategies, tips, and resources on how to improve your percentages in any of those categories. So they actually give, again, tangible, evidence-based, you know, if school safety is an area of concern for either us as a district or you as an individual school, here's our playbook of resources and strategies and techniques to use in the classroom and with students.
Yeah, to sort of answer some of the questions on like what do you think improved, I mean, as a student, I would love to comment on my perspective from BFA. I did have a question first with the school safety. There's only one question and was that the same for both years?
Yes.
Just that one question?
Well, that question was included in both years, but I think we had more questions in that category last year.
So because there's only one question, does that account for all? So that's like the only
That's the
percentage for that.
Yeah, so that's the percentage of respondents that answered favorably to that one question.
Mhm. So commenting on the school safety aspect at least, I think that if we see the 16% increase, me personally, my perspective is that I think that correlates with what we were doing from this year to last. I see in BFA at least we have a stricter attendance policy, more school safety officers. So as a BFA student, again, I'm not sure how many students from BFA responded to that, but I do think that it does correlate in that sense of favorably going up on accounts to last year. More, do you want to talk about? Sure. Yeah, I think last year, I think we see such an increase in some of these categories also due to COVID. I think that was just like, that changed with the sense of belonging and the well-being and school safety, everything about that. I think a lot of people just like felt very isolated and unsafe going to school. I think that like as far as the sense of belonging as well, like the masks made it really tough to communicate with like peers and teachers and classmates. So that increase makes a lot of sense to me, and I think I see that. But what me and Leah were also talking about was
Everybody?
Yeah. Sensors.
Is that my cue?
You started.
Am I missing something?
That means your time's done. Leah,
Bye-bye.
There we go.
Sorry.
No, you're good. So with the sense of belonging, it's really great to see an increase in that, but I think that we still see just about 20% of students who don't feel safe, which is still very concerning because that's about a 1 in 5 ratio. and that's just people who felt comfortable saying no on the survey. So I think that, you know, it's still something to work towards, and that we should always be looking at that data and not just the increases, but.
Yeah, and we were also thinking about the percentage of people that did respond. And again, as a high school student, I feel like some of the high schoolers that probably didn't respond is concerning, like why didn't they? Because like you said, how they had teachers encourage us to do this survey and sat down and were like, you guys need to complete this survey. Those that also didn't, I also think that they could have brought numbers and kind of changed them, because those that refused to respond, you know, might have definitely changed those numbers a bit. So I also think that's a little bit concerning.
Thanks, Leah. Thank you, Laura. Grant.
The lights went off, that means I'm done. I'm timed out for the
You're
evening.
Quick question?
Yeah.
Okay. You said there were recommendations from Panorama on how to improve scores. Are those tailored to the improvement that you want to make? So if you can imagine that someone that wants to go from 95 to 100 is going to do different actions than someone wants to go from 60 to 80. Do they say, because you're here, these are your actions, because you're here, these are your actions?
They're not that specific, so they're not that specific. But what I will say is they align with where we want to go as a district in terms of social emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, and restorative practices. They align with the work we want to be doing in our schools. There's nothing that's like, oh no, that doesn't work for Maple Run.
Sure.
Susan, did you have something else?
Well, it was kind of, we were talking earlier about benchmarks, but it doesn't really make sense, like, how do we compare it to other, like, districts?
Yeah, and the challenge with that is they have to have Panorama to really do a really similar comparison. And there definitely are other districts in Vermont that use Panorama, but there's not a lot of them.
Yeah.
So.
You said
The
this
lights
was,
went out, Mr. DeLore.
I thought you would run away and then it come on and nobody's there. 3rd grade to 12th grade.
Yes.
That being the case, I would truly be interested in seeing a breakdown by the schools, because that's a huge difference, even between what we offer to the middle school and to the primary grades and to the high school, and I would truly like to see a breakdown.
I kind of agree with that, just because a lot of the high schoolers were probably able to do that on their own. Whereas I wonder if the littles answered differently because there was a teacher there. Like, do you have someone who feels safe? Do they feel like, oh, I should probably say yes because my teacher's asking me the question? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, would they have answered differently? Like, I don't know. The breakdown would be cool to see, but I think the numbers, it's great that they went up.
And the one thing that I just want to go back to kind of what you said around the Likert scale, like a 1 to 5 rating. I do make a 1-page like snapshot cheat sheet that administration hands out to staff. And there's no reason why we couldn't do like, okay, completely understand would be like a 4 out of 4 versus somewhat understand would be a 2. Like just kind of giving more of those examples for
And that would stay
staff
within.
to have as their own cheat sheet in their back pocket when they're supporting students.
But
Which
if we
doesn't
wanna-
have any difference in changing the software or
Right.
the,
But it would really have to be a 5-point scale.
well, I'm just using that as an
Okay,
example,
alright.
just, yeah.
Anybody else?
One last question. Are you happy, are you, meeting the collective you, happy with choosing Panorama? Like, are any of you saying, oh, I wish we went with a different screener? Or are you pleased with the usability of it and the data that you're receiving and the application that, how you can use it?
Yeah, again, this is just, I can only speak for myself, but I think all the work we've done as a leadership team, and I know John has done a significant amount of work pushing in with staff with his curriculum meetings. Overall, it's working really well for us because it aligns with the CASEL competencies, and there is a way to, through the MTSS system, there is a way to identify specific students that need kind of that outreach, that are kind of falling through the cracks that maybe we wouldn't catch through our weekly check-in
Right.
meetings. So the data tool has been really, really helpful with giving a more kind of, let's stand back and look at what the data is telling us, instead of what we think is happening because we're in it, 5 days a week, 7 hours a day. But there's pros and cons to any software, but it's great.
And you feel like you have enough resources, people and otherwise, to be able to address the needs of those individual students and the classes on a whole?
Yeah, I think as we continue to do this kind of data exploration, like the presentation I did 2 weeks ago, I think, feels like many moons ago, we're always kind of reassessing and reevaluating where are we at in terms of student supports. What else do we need? Where are the gaps? And how can we meet those
Right.
gaps?
So sometimes when you do a screening like this, you end up finding that you have X amount of
Yeah.
people who need help, and then you realize, oh.
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
don't
that,
have-
and that's where the tool is helpful because, like I said, it identifies those gaps that sometimes are in our blind spot.
Right.
Yeah, so it's helpful driving all of those conversations, also around PD. What do
Yes.
we need to focus on in terms of professional development
Great.
for staff?
Alex, we put this survey out from Panorama, this is just our second time? Or third?
So
Third.
this is
Third.
our third time because we did it twice
Oh,
last
okay.
year and then and we'll do it again this year in the
Before-
spring.
okay.
Yeah.
And we'll get another,
Oh, I'm sure Bill will definitely have that on a
Perfect.
future agenda for
Perfect.
myself.
yes. Aaron, put that down. Okay, cool. Thank you,
Thank you,
Alexis.
Alexis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right, moving on. Let's see, old business. Let's see, 7A, unpaid bias and anti-racism training, Bill?
Yeah, there's not much, as you know, we've talked about what the work we've been doing with Creative Discourse Group. We meet tomorrow night with the group that's going to be leading the work that we're going to be doing in the community to work on action steps with the identified areas from the listening sessions.
Okay,
So that's happening tomorrow night at 6 at central office.
awesome. Any questions, comments? Okay. Setting goals, Grant?
Yeah, we have some draft goals that need to be finalized, and then they'll go to the board. One more meeting, we think.
And ETA when they become the board next month?
And I
or-
forgot to send out a meeting.
Can I get that meeting on the schedule?
I'll get that meeting scheduled.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Do you think it might come on our agenda next month?
I think February, yeah.
Somewhere in February.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Negotiation updates. Jack, do you have any?
Yeah, we met, and our first meeting, we set our ground rules, but our second meeting, we exchanged proposals. So each side explained their proposals to the other side, and that's where we're at now. In our next meeting, we'll start to discuss those various goals that each side has, or positions that each side has.
When's the next meeting?
It's opposite the board meeting, so it's next
Next
Wednesday,
Okay. Good.
which is, I forget the date, 25th.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Nilda, do you have an update for negotiations?
Nothing new to report since the last meeting. I think I mentioned that.
Yeah.
We've had one meeting, we're working through the rules of the game, so to speak, and we're ironing that out, and then we'll continue our plan.
Okay. And the next meeting for that's the 26th?
It's not, well, yeah, it is.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right, item D, the budget, so this is action. The administration recommends a motion to approve the warning and to warn the budget article for the school budget for the school year 2023-2024 for $69,422,742 using the required statutory language for the budget. Can I have a motion, please? Thank you, Joanna. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Grant.
I was saying Nilda.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said, oh, no. Oh, okay, discussion?
So Martha, why don't you go
Yep, okay.
ahead with updates?
I'll
where
give
we're
you a
at.
really quick update. So the difference from the last board meeting to this board meeting, you'll see it on the bottom of page 2. There was just 2 small pieces of information that were added. I received the Tech Ed 6th semester average of students, which actually generated a reduced expenditure of $87,411, I think. I didn't write that figure down. And we got a slight bump up on our equalized pupils by 0.88 equalized pupils. So with those 2 pieces of information, our expense budget went down, that 87,000, and our ed spending calculation went from, I believe it was 14%, 14.22% at the last meeting, has gone down to 13.98% still. And our tax rate is estimated to be $1.3604 at this point. There are still some pieces of information that could change that once everything is settled and the legislature has acted on the yield. That still can change. But that's the information we have as of right now, and that's the information that's proposed to be adopted by the board.
One
Question?
thing, why don't you go finish that, I'll add a comment.
No, that was done.
Yeah, no, but people should be able to ask you questions before I go
anybody have
where I'm
questions for
going
me?
next.
Any questions?
I will let you know in the legislature right now, there's a bill quickly moving through the legislature that may get done this week. That is on town meeting and the election style. That the past couple of years with COVID, as you know, there was election allowed, and it doesn't really affect Maple Run that much because we do everything with Australian ballot, but it allows towns to elect to go to Australian ballot. That might be open meeting law. Why do I bring that up here? Because there are a couple pieces in the bill that could affect the warning. And so the reason there's a tag phrase, I talked with our attorney early this morning about that last part of the phrase, that are required statutory language for budgets. They may take out the percentage change per equalized pupil. It's gone through the House, it's now over at the Senate, and it's part of the bill. It's a small part of the bill, because that sunsets after this year, it goes away. It was passed last year in the change in weighting students, that they'll no longer put on the ballot the change per equalized pupil starting next fiscal year. But there's a change of foot, there's a movement afoot in the House, and it's now into the Senate, that would go away. And so the warning language would, there's a second sentence on the warning for the budget that says, I want to make sure I get it right, that says, this projected spending per equalized pupil is 13.9%, higher than the spending for the current year. That second sentence would go away if this bill goes through, and it looks like it's got a chance. We didn't think it had much of a chance. I didn't get this to you earlier, but it's picked up a lot of steam in the past 3 or 4 days. So
Thanks, Bill.
So they just see a number, they don't see the year on year,
they would see,
no indication of
they
year on year
wouldn't see that
change?
percentage change. That's only been there for about 5 or 6 years, right, Martha?
Yeah.
At the most. And so, and it's gonna go away after this next fiscal, when we get to the 2025 fiscal year. And so, the reason I talked to Nilda and Nina about this was, should I ask all of you to be ready to come back to another meeting, so we gotta change the warning next week? And in working with our attorney, having the motion with that last phrase about the required statutory language for budgets will allow that change to go through without you having to come back, unless you wanted to. So I wanted to let you all know that why that is there.
So that might have an effect on the 828.67, that a person from the St. Albans City will be having an increase. That won't
It won't
affect
touch
that.
the tax rate, it's just what goes on the ballot,
Okay,
what's said on the ballot. It won't change the tax rate.
okay,
Change that.
okay.
It's wording on the ballot. I just
Okay,
wanna be clear
thank you.
about that.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Nilda,
Nilda. Oh, sorry, Nilda, go ahead.
Thank you. Bill, can you take a moment to explain to the board and the listening community and me, and most of us know this, but I just hear it one more time, the sort of the inverse relationship between the CLA and the appraisal or assessment of houses, and how that teeter-totter thing works.
Sure, and I'll let Martha tell me when I go astray. How about we add that little piece into it?
thank you.
So the common level of appraisal, as we talked about at the last meeting, and it's still true in this budget today, we are down a little over 2 cents in what's called the educational tax rate from last year. So what happens in Vermont across all cities, all towns, municipalities, is that what your house, I'm gonna use residential because that's the easiest. What your house sells for and what it's assessed for are different values. And especially in the past 3 years, real estate value, what it can actually sell for, has gone way up really fast. And if I need to get technical for what's happened in the city, I will, but I'm gonna stay away from it. But if anyone wants to know, I'm willing to go down that road. And so what they have to do an adjustment, and they do this across the state, because when Act 60 and Act 68 were put in place for the current education funding law, there was talked about, and you used to hear it, about gold towns and poor towns. Sorry, but that's the terminology they used. And that the gold towns could under-evaluate their property and not reassess it, and therefore devaluing their grand list and their total actual property for that town compared to the state of Vermont. So this common level appraisal was put in, I believe it was in Act 60, came in, so I'm back to like 98 now, 98, 2000 era, but they put this in to force towns to reappraise when they got below 80%. And so it's helped keep the actual grand list across the state and help equalize what's happening across the state. So how it affects your tax rate, as the CLA goes down, your tax rate will increase even if there's no more money needed for the school system. Because what's happening is you're not paying, back to terms from the legislation, your fair share as a town compared to what the state does to get that dollar yield. So as I said to you in the last meeting, city's seen almost a 14% jump or down in their common level of appraisal. That's a huge hit to the city taxpayers, but at the same time, no matter whatever the board elected to do to the budget, that same adjustment has to be done to get the money that needs to go to the dollar yield at the state. How'd I do, Nilda? Did that make sense?
Yep. Thank you for doing that.
Martha, did I miss anything or forget anything? I don't want to get too technical unless people want to know the technical pieces.
No, I think it's just, you just have to realize that what's on your tax bill is what the town has appraised your house for. And it may not have been appraised for 5, 10, 15 years. So the value of that house really is not fair market value. So that's what this is doing. It's just making the value of what you're paying your taxes on, bringing it to fair market value.
Yeah, and when the city, here's the thing, when the city reassesses, the tax rates will go down, but the amount you pay in taxes will probably be almost exactly the same. It's just the rate will adjust with a higher assessed value of your house. And I know the city's trying to contract with that, and there was an article, I think in Digger, I saw it somewhere in one of the state media, about how many municipalities right now are very much behind and below the 80%, how many years it might take to get this fixed.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, everybody clear on what the motion is? Any reread it, or everybody's okay with that? Okay, why don't we go ahead and do a vote to approve?
Point of order,
What?
I would like you to read the motion, please, into the minutes.
Oh, okay. I did before, Nilda, did you not hear it?
Can you
I heard
repeat
it.
it?
Okay, yep, no. The administration recommends a motion to approve the warning and to warn the budget article for the school budget for the school year 2023-2024 for $69,422,742 using the required statutory language for budgets. Okay. Okay. All right, ready to vote. Joanna,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Nilda,
Yes,
Peter,
Yes,
Grant,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
and Nina. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. All right, moving on to item E. MRUSD warning, 7E. So there's action here. Bill had kind of touched upon it a little bit. The administration recommends a motion to approve the warning. Did everybody get a chance to read that in 7E? Can I have a motion? Anybody?
What's the motion?
The administration recommends a motion to approve the warning.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Susan. Is there?
Second.
Thank you, Katie.
Yep.
Okay, any discussion?
So just to clarify what you were saying, if this bill goes through,
Yeah,
if the bill goes through, then the projected spending for equalized pupil is 13.98% higher than spending for the current year. That will be erased.
that would go away if the bill goes through. And then we have until, Aaron, what was the date? I'm sorry. I forgot. February 5th for that to go into effect.
Nilda, do you have any questions, comments?
no, I do have a comment though. I mean, for lack of a better way of looking at this, I think the way I understand it is that it sort of, if you don't have that number there, it sort of takes away this sticker shock approach.
Yeah,
If that makes sense?
yeah. Yeah, anybody else? No? All right, okay, we're ready to vote. Again, the administration recommends a motion to approve the warning. Joanna,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Nilda,
Yes,
Peter,
yes,
Grant,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
and Nina. Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thank you. All right, next one is F, the budget communications.
Yes, so we're working, I've had a conversation with Nilda and Nina about this. I talked about this a little bit last time. There's a group of us, the folks who help with communications around the district, either at the school level or with district communications. We're putting together our usual annual report that will be published, that we do as MRUSD. That comes out in early February, and then we're planning the newspaper insert event that happens the end of February. We'll run twice right before town meeting day on the 7th. In addition to that, last year, remember, we did one big video. We're actually doing that. We're actually making a segment of 5 videos that show some of the things that are supported by the budget and the work that happens. We're trying to get other people from around the district to talk about that. I actually know a couple were contacted today and have agreed, the facilities directors, to talk about how the budget supports the work of keeping our facilities up to date. So we're trying to do 2 3-minute videos, and then Dino's gonna put it all together for like a half-hour show that will go on to Northwest Access, but for the web and social media, it'll be something that people will digest since they're willing to do 2, 3,
It's a great idea.
4-minute videos, but nothing wrong. It's not original, it was stolen from other districts last year that tried it, so,
Whoever thought about it it's a great idea. Way to put a personal,
yeah. So we're,
face on it. That's
so I
wonderful.
know Nina and Nilda and I talked about, and Martha wasn't in the conversation, but she and I have talked about the one we did last year. We're gonna really pare it down, do that at the beginning and the end, just to really kind of give some brief overviews. I know the PowerPoint that we always use every year, we'll use parts of that in different places. I haven't thought all that out. And Aaron Rushlow and Aaron Smith are the 2 leading this endeavor, and they're doing a great job of like keeping me on a timeline to say, let's get these things going. So we're starting filming actually this week with some things. Not your part, though. You have a little bit more time. I told you I'd give you a week warning, so she was looking at me like,
saw
wait
her
a
eyes get
minute, you haven't said yes, you haven't told me I have something to do yet, so. And that actually just happened today, down in my office. So, that's our plan right now. I think, if you have ideas, as I said, we're gonna do something on facilities, we're gonna do something on authentic learning, kind of calling it, classroom out of the box. We're doing something on student supports, because we heard from our listening session, and, you know, it's been great having Alexis here the past couple of meetings, because I think she's really trying to explain it here, and this gets out to people in the public, but as we said, we don't really publicize all the supports, and we need to do a better job of that. And then the last one is our connections to the community, and how we use the community for learning opportunities, and how we help support, and our students go out and work with the community. We're gonna have something from every school and every video. It'll probably be like 30 seconds to a minute at most, and really try to drive home those things.
And how will this get out to?
So we'll be doing social media for all the Facebook, Instagram from the district, mainly Facebook, because we found, like, people don't hit our Instagram, and I tried Twitter for a little bit, no one hits that. So Facebook is really popular in Franklin County, so we use Facebook. And yeah, well, yeah, for better or for worse, but it works. And then also Bridget, I'm sorry, I always skip her last name. What?
Is it Ogden or something?
Hodgson. Higdon, thank you, from the editor from the paper. She's agreed to, as we're gonna try to do, is we'll turn some of this into print and put it into articles. She's willing to, if we just give her some ideas to run with it, write an article for us. I also planned a couple of letters to the editor. May twist the arm of a board chair to write one as well. She doesn't know that yet. Nelda.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Bill,
yeah.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Maybe you could put links on each of the school websites as well, and maybe, I don't know, like Chamber of Commerce, you know, just different places that people pick up stuff, or each of the towns, maybe that would make more sense. But, yeah, I think it's a great idea. I like it.
Great. Sounds awesome, thank you. All right, new business. Nilda, I got that right, or I forgot?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, just wanna make sure I got it.
I think you have A and I have B.
Oh, okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so, now that you said that, so for some reason I didn't write that down. Okay.
Okay.
8A, so we have a revised F23 capitalization of assets policy first reading. So we have an action so the administration recommends a motion to warn the F23 capitalization of assets policy as a first read for possible adoption at the next board meeting on February 1st, 2023. Could I have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Katie. Any discussion?
Martha, you want to explain why we're doing this?
Sorry.
Sorry, I thought you had it.
No, it's one of the required policies, and we definitely need it in place for all our federal grants as well.
Yeah. You had told me through an email, I have it here, that we just had some wrong legal references, and there were some words that needed to be changed. And
Yes.
when the audit was going through, we found that they advised us that we update it.
Right, the policy.
The policy, we already had one, but
Right,
it needs to be
the,
updated.
The legal citation, I think, was,
Was wrong, and the
was
new
wrong.
legal reference on line 34
Yeah.
is what you told me.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And 2 words added on line 15.
Yeah. All right, so any other questions, comments? Okay, so go ahead and vote on this. Joanna?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Nilda?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes?
Grant?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Nina? Yes. Motion passes for first reading, 7-0. Thank you. Nilda, you're up.
Thank you. Okay,
So as most of you know, we have 4 board representatives who are up for, 2 board representatives that are up for renewal, and then we have the vacancy of Ryer and Al. We're allowed by state statute as a board to appoint someone to fill in the term of a member. So we can appoint someone to fill in the term for Al Corey, and we can also appoint someone to fill in the term for Ryer. And then the positions of Grant, he has indicated he's not rerunning, so they'll have to get a new applicant. And also, I think Jack has indicated he is rerunning, so we don't have to worry about that position. So those are sort of the things that are out there. We've also found out that you do have to get signatures, and your signatures have to be in to the town clerk and the city clerk and the Fairfield clerk, is it? Is it clerk in Fairfield? By January 31st. So that's kind of a
January
thing.
30th.
30th, thank you.
30th at 5 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We were gonna get that verified, weren't we?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't get back to you, just tell you it was the 30th, not the 31st.
Okay, thank you.
Mistake.
Anyway, if you have any, people that you know from your communities that have expressed interest over the years of having a really good time and coming onto the board, please encourage them to apply. It would be great to have some choices for people to make, and it would be great to have a new selection for the board. So we don't have to take any real action tonight because we don't have any action to take, except for you guys have now been advised that we're going to appoint someone as soon as we get someone to appoint.
Right, I just didn't know, Nilda, if you wanted to talk about the process that the board's used in the past, which was usually after tonight, the administration's been asked to advertise for anyone that might be willing to, and then at the next meeting, talk about anyone that submits their name to fill in between now and the town meeting day. For the
Yeah, what he just said, I wanted to say also. I think that's important to get that through. Joanna?
Yes. So just a point of clarification. So are you saying until town meeting day, Bill?
That's correct. The statute says that until the next school district meeting. Is actually
Okay,
how
I'm
it
sorry. I
reads.
thought you said
And that's our next.
finish out their
So
terms.
no, they fill in. So you'll see on the warning, there was one there, since Ryer had submitted his resignation, we were able to get it on the warning time. It says to fill out the remaining 2 years of a 3-year term.
Okay, great.
And it's
Thank you.
posted differently because it's different than the other
So-
terms.
And that will be by ballot. That will not be an appointment. That's my question.
It's an appointment until town meeting.
Until
day.
town meeting day,
And then
and then they would finish out
if
two,
there
not
are,
a
if there's
full.
someone who gets enough, I mean, here's the piece, is that people need to run for it.
Yep.
And then have enough votes to meet the qualifying voting, so number, which I don't remember what that is at this point.
So, just to clarify,
So Joanna, you're right, I did say it wrong.
Okay, that's okay. I just want to make sure I understand. Not trying to be critical.
so someone, we would appoint someone for, what's today? 2 more meetings.
Yeah,
Okay.
what, yeah,
Not even
one meeting, really.
If we appoint them at the next meeting.
If you appoint them at the next meeting, they would have the second meeting in
Okay,
February and the
right.
first meeting in March, because it's the first,
It comes before town meeting.
comes before town meeting day.
Do we have
Okay.
to? Like,
You don't have to, you need to have a majority of members of your, under state statute to operate as a board. If you are a 9-member voting, so you must have at least 5 votes seated. I'm not saying at the meeting, but, you have 5 votes with members. And then the majority, in order to have a meeting, and you're fine, because right now tonight, we're at 7, right? So we have 9 votes, we're 7, we're over the 5, we're 5 or over. And then whatever is the majority of the number of seats filled, you need to have to constitute a quorum. So before tonight, when we had 9, we needed 5. Tonight, we only needed 4 because you're at 7. To
Okay.
constitute a quorum to have a meeting. Sorry, but this is all the
yeah.
technicalities of
It is-
Vermont's
it's good,
municipality
it's good.
open meeting law.
Go ahead, Julie. It is 2 meetings, the 1st and the 15th.
Yeah.
And the person that, let's say we appoint someone for 2 meetings, they would still, and they would still have to run for the board
Yes.
if they so desired,
Yeah.
and then pass.
When?
Do we have any major votes that we have to take in the next 2 or 3 meetings? Where we,
Any major what?
any major actions for the board that we would want those voices necessarily present? If there's nothing major happening, does it make sense to fill those seats?
Because our next meeting is on the 1st, right? So if we appointed someone on the 1st, would they be acting? So it would only be,
It'd be
Two
two
meetings.
meetings.
Two meetings.
If we appoint someone to the next meeting, then they have 2 meetings.
Right.
But if we don't have any actions during those meetings,
right,
it's just the board getting together to
Right.
talk
get
about.
together?
I mean, it would, in an ideal situation, it would be great if the person that gets appointed for the short term is interested in the long term, right? So that they get to get their feet
Yeah.
wet and then continue on, but it doesn't have to be that way. At all.
And Nelda, you and I discussed today, we have heard of, I'm not gonna release any names, but we've heard that there are a couple people out there gathering names.
Oh, I called the town clerk today, and there's one person that's picked up an application, and the city clerk wasn't answering, so I think they were at lunch when I was trying to get
Yeah.
through. So I'll try tomorrow.
I know
I've done
of
this
2
for years.
that
I've
are running
always
for the town.
called to find out just how many people are running, because I always want there to be people running, you
Yeah.
know?
I know of 2 for the town and 1 for the city right now that are getting signatures.
Yeah.
And not, obviously, that's not including,
3.
right.
Well, hopefully we don't have the same people, so we actually have a pool of people that can, get out there.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. All right, let's, move on here. So we're on to item 9, other business, warrants. So I am,
Thank you.
looking for, the administration is recommending a motion to approve the warrant, acknowledging that passage of this motion will act as authorization and signature of any individual board member participating remotely. May I please have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Who's that?
Nina.
Nina?
Yep.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Joanna?
Joanna. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, we're gonna vote on the motion, which is to approve the warrant acknowledging that passage of the motion will act as authorization and signature of any individual board members participating remotely. Grant?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes?
Joanna?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Nina?
Yes.
Cedar?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Nilda, yes. Okay, next item is superintendent's report.
Yes, I have one item to bring to the board. I wanted to let you all know, I think most of you know, last spring in the legislative session, there was law passed requiring PCB testing of all schools. And as we all know, Burlington's been dealing with quite a bit of a situation. If you haven't heard, it's not as much in the press, I know it's been in Digger, but some of the first schools to get tested were found to have PCBs as well. Cabot had to close down their gym and part of their art room, and I don't think they have their gym back yet. I know they have their art room back. And another school down south was found to have PCBs. It's quite prevalent. I wanted to alert you that things really slowed down in the testing, but the testing company ran out of people to actually conduct the tests. And so now they're ramping back up, and City School is on the early testing schedule, which will be happening during the week of February break. I'll be working with Joan next week to start getting information out to parents about what this means for testing, because people get confused with all the rates. That's the rates at allowable levels that you're allowed to have, and that really got confusing with Burlington with everything they were doing. This is going to happen to every school in the state. If you'd like a presentation about it, I'm actually on a superintendent's committee for the state for PCBs. I've been asked to serve on that, which we meet monthly to give guides to school systems on how they communicate to their communities about the work that's being done and what really do these rates mean. Because the first sets of communications that came out from the Agency of Environmental were technically very correct. But they were so correct technically, they were hard for the average person. It's just like Nilda asked me about CLA. Can you translate that down from the technical language of CLA into what people can understand? So I wanted to let the board know that's happening. You may hear some things about that. All of our buildings were constructed, had work done prime time when PCBs were in construction materials. I'm not trying to make any alerts. I just want everyone to be aware. Every building we have was under construction from the late 50s to till 82, I believe it is. So it's just, you know, we have the same thing, you know, if we are found to have PCBs, it doesn't mean that it's dangerous for students and or staff. Just like we have asbestos in our buildings, but we have asbestos remediation plans and containment plans. And we'll probably be in the same place with PCBs.
Okay.
Thank you. Board announcements?
I've got a couple things, Neil. Number one, will we get to see, we requested, but we'll get to see the individual school survey results?
Yeah, I need to talk with the leadership team about that. There's some issues with that. I understand the request and I want to talk with them some more. It doesn't mean I won't do it, Peter, I just want to talk with them.
Okay.
All right.
Next, the principals that are applying for jobs, are we going to get to meet them prior, or are we just going to get a recommendation and approve them sight unseen again?
You're going to get them the night that I bring the recommendation at the next meeting.
Okay. And I just want to congratulate girls. Tonight you took part in the meeting and you were tremendous. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
I should have probably done this earlier in the meeting, but I'm going to do it now. I want to read into our record the resignation letter submitted by Ryer Erickson. He said, I am hereby resigning from my position as school board director for Maple Run Unified School District effective January 16th, 2023. Unfortunately, the district and area has proven to be less welcoming and accepting of new and different ideas than it claims. I truly hope the work of anti-bias and anti-racist is done in earnest and extends to the board. Watching a member get up and walk out of the meeting as I announced my resignation was galling. Thank you, Ryer Erickson. All right, I just wanted to read that into the record and find out if anyone else has any other board announcements. And if you don't,
Yeah, I would just like to have my part written into it, Nilda, and I would just like to say that I left because I found his statement to be disrespectful to the community, to the board, and to the community as a whole, and I found it disrespectful, and I'm just not going to take that, because I know differently. Particularly, there's some people on this board that have fought tooth and nail for his causes, and I thought that they did not deserve what they got.
okay. All right, so that's a good segue to what the next thing I wanted to do is. I was hoping everyone would take an extra 15 minutes and that we could go into executive session for personnel matter. And the personnel we'll discuss when we get in there. I need the board members and Bill at this meeting, please.
Hey, Nilda, do we want to just agenda for future meetings, address that first, or are you going to come back out and do that?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you something. Susan, can you clarify what it is you're looking for that? Because it's kind of gotten diluted out over time. And we don't know what the actual task that we need to do is.
So I think there's been a lot of discussion in previous board meetings, or I'm gonna say, some discussion in previous board meetings about the flags that potentially are gonna be flown on the pole, and the flag has been flown on the pole last, being political, and we should be non-political. So I guess I wanted to have a discussion about that, and maybe some simple solutions, so we can separate whether or not it's, even if it's not political, we can separate it from the educational focus or the district focus.
Okay.
I didn't say that right, but.
This budget stuff,
good.
we'll tackle that,
That's good.
okay?
I didn't
I
understand
wanted to address it, not let it go without being addressed.
Nilda, I just said to Susan, and I thank you for saying that, because I said to, I just understood about having a separate flagpole, which is something easy the administration can do, but now I understand the discussion's a little different than that, so
Yeah.
thank you for
I mean, that would be
Yeah.
a solution,
Yeah.
and it would be
Yeah.
a student.
Yep.
Okay, and Bill, question, can we all, can everybody stay in this room and those that need to leave?
We're gonna go right across the hall and I'm gonna use my computer and take it with me.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I need a motion to go into executive session for personnel matters.
So moved, it's Nina.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, Grant,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Joanna,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes?
Susan,
Yes.
Hilda, both yes. Thank you.